All right. Fantastic. So I'm super excited to be interviewing a friend of mine, Kumba Shakur, who we've been trying to get on the show and we had quite the difficult time trying to connect. And I'm glad that we did. So Kumba Shakur is a loneliness coach. She's the founder of Yuga Bella Journeys, and she's on a mission to help liberate women from self-disconnection, stress and pain that's created by loneliness. So today we're going to be talking about loneliness and how do we conquer loneliness? How does that play a role in our lives? How does that affect our sleep? How does that affect our stress? And I'm really excited to have this conversation because I think it's really, really timely based off of what we're experiencing right now in the world with COVID. So Kumba, welcome to Sleep Science Academy, interviewing the experts. I'm excited to dive into this.
Hi, Devin. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm super excited and honored to be here.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, we've connected several times over the last couple of years. I know we both went to IIN, Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and kind of run in the same circles. And so it was nice to reconnect. Recently, I think it was down in Miami. We were at a workshop, an emotional trauma workshop. And so I'm glad that we're connecting and having this conversation. So why don't we start off by you sharing a little bit about, why do you feel, what is loneliness and why does it happen? Like in your work that you do with women, what creates this sense of loneliness and why are people experiencing so much loneliness today?
Okay, loneliness, there are several layers to loneliness. Most of the time when you mention loneliness, people picture being alone, being isolated, or having poor social relationships. But loneliness in its own, really starts with disconnecting with the self. It starts with being disconnected from the essence of who we are. That's where loneliness starts. And I can say the root of loneliness is emotional disconnection. We are taught by nurturers, we are taught in society as we are kids, as we grow up, to always disconnect from difficulties, to always disconnect from this difficult emotions, from pain. When a kid is crying, we ask him to stop crying. When somebody is expressing pain, we're asking them not to be negative, to focus on the good. So all these negative emotions that are repressed dwell within and emerge every time, they are triggered. And that's the root of self-disconnection, because there is something deep within you that you're not paying attention to. So the root of loneliness is really disconnection from the self. You're first disconnecting from yourself, and then there are other layers to it. We see nowadays a lot of unwanted loneliness. People that have poor social relationships, they would want to have a more vibrant, a more nourishing social life, social circles, but it's not the case because we are so much in the doing. We're so busy crossing one checklist item after another. There's that. There are people who are facing unfulfilling or inexistent romantic relationships. And as we grow, we need to mate, we need intimacy, you need to be touched, you need to be loved and loved back. There's that type of loneliness. And then the third type of loneliness is the person who's well surrounded, who's around people, but still feels lonely. Why? Because of societal expectations, because your environment is molding you to be something that doesn't align with the truth of who you are. So wow. There are different.
Wow. So hold on. I'm going to just stop you for a second. And we're just going to break that down. So there's three types of loneliness. And the first type is disconnection from the essence of who you are. And what I hear you saying is that happens, it's conditioned from childhood. And that's let's say, maybe call it the first layer, if you will. And then type. And then the second type is disconnection from others. So in romantic relationships, and then the third type is being around people or having romantic relationships, but still feeling lonely or disconnected. Is that what I hear you saying?
Absolutely, yes.
Got it. So so there's a lot there. And I think maybe we should start by talking about the first type of loneliness, because obviously that's being disconnected from the essence of who you are. That's kind of where maybe the second two types of loneliness stem from. Would that be safe to say?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be safe to say that. Yeah.
Okay. So, let's start with why specifically, you mentioned you gave a few nuggets there as to like how that can happen in childhood. And, why do you think, is that something that naturally happens just because our parents don't know how to bring us up emotionally resilient? Or where do you think that first disconnection that creates, the suffering in relationships and in unfulfilled careers, where do you think that comes from? Is it just the conditioned response, or where do you feel like that first disconnection is created generally?
The first disconnection, okay, I will not criticize our brave parents who are like tried their best. I mean, but the thing is, it's as human beings, we are naturally wired to have an aversion for pain. We don't like to suffer. We have an inherent aversion for pain. So when you're suffering, when difficulties come up and you're hurting, the first response is to try to make it go away, like look away, look aside, go somewhere else, or find another distraction to make it go away. It's a natural response. But then the more you study emotions, you practice mindfulness, and you study the kind of things we've studied, you realize that like repressing emotions is just like, emotions are like imbalanced signals from our subtle bodies. As Joshua says, the body is a finely tuned machine. Every time it sends a signal, there's like an imbalance deep within that we need to look into. So if you look away, if you don't pay attention, the problem deep inside is just getting worse and worse. So as we are taught to like disconnect from emotions, from painful emotions, it just gets worse because let's look at it this way. When a situation happens and you're suffering from it, there's a part of you that is uncomfortable with the situation, and there is the problem. You have to go within and realize, what is the part of me that is really affected by this situation, that is getting hurt? And there lies the answer. There is the problem that needs fixing. But if you're looking away, if you're not paying attention, then the problem that deserves attention is there and is getting worse, bigger and bigger. I don't know. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that this happens when it's a disconnection to feeling painful emotions. And, our parents, they tried the best they could, but, they kind of trained and locked that in by, when we're feeling these painful emotions, helping us distract from them versus feel them. Is that pretty much what I hear you saying?
Absolutely. Feel versus avoid.
Feel versus avoid. So this is a pattern that's created at a young age, unintentionally, right? And then it gets carried over into our adult lives. So, and I could totally resonate with this. So, for me personally, right? It's like, who wants to feel sad or negative or lonely or these negative feelings? It's like, before I started to study some of the things that I've studied, you distract. Social media, food, TV, or whatever it is, right? Because trying to change how we feel, trying to change the state of our current, pain. And what you're saying is that disconnects us from our essence and doesn't allow us to, to step into our power. Is that what's on the other side of, once we start to choose to feel those uncomfortable emotions again?
Feeling emotions opens up heart space. As you feel emotions, because you completely surrender. When you're fighting emotions, you're still trying to control. Control comes in different forms. You could be criticizing, judging the person who's making you suffer, or another way to control is expectations. And when things go wrong, you're still upset and you find ways to rationalize what you're going through to make sure that you're not wrong, or just to negative self-talk can also emerge. You're beating yourself up, you're criticizing yourself for being in the state where you are. Those are all levels of control. But when you completely surrender and accept the situation, because there's nothing wrong in vulnerability. We all perceive suffering as wrong, but when you suffer, you accept the situation for what it is, and you take the emotions for what they are. You feel them. Feeling means really being sensing like how they feel in the body, how the sensations that they procure in the body, getting familiar with it. And that's where healing starts. It opens up heart space, it melts the heart, and compassion arises. As compassion comes in, you can forgive yourself, forgive others, and liberate yourself. But as long as you're fighting emotions, you're fighting pain, you're not really being true to yourself, because there's still a side of yourself that you're denying, a side of yourself that you're refusing to let emerge. So there's disconnection from the truth of who you are. Because when you're connecting to your emotions, then you can really understand who you are, what's making you suffer, and what's beyond this suffering, the vulnerable, like the part of you that's really uncomfortable. So that's the type of loneliness that I mean, like it's self-disconnection, because you're not fully in true cohesion with the truth of who you are, you know?
Wow. I feel like number one, that takes awareness. And that takes courage, because obviously that's not an easy journey to go down, allowing yourself again to fully feel and really start to feel some of those uncomfortable emotions that we try to push aside and not feel, because that's what we were trained to do. Right.
Exactly.
So would you say that, the intention, courage, what are some of the other things that people that are listening to this need to have in order to just even begin the journey of healing their hearts and stepping back into their true power and presence and essence?
First off, intention is really important, the intention behind a practice, because Devin, something that I'd like to shed light on is the deceitful myths of mindfulness. Mindfulness offers, the steady practice of mindfulness studies a lot of great benefits and health improvements, spirituality, and all of that. But because there's this misconception, there's this expectation that when you practice mindfulness, you're expected to be Zen, you're expected to be immune to stress, you're expected pretty much to be perfect, or so much so that when certain sides of ourselves emerge, we beat ourselves up. For instance, practicing present moment awareness, being in the present. And sometimes, the mind, when there are imbalances in areas of our lives, or what we call primary foods, like let's say certain areas of your life that you neglect, and it comes back through difficult emotions or imbalances, certain imbalances like in your life, you cannot fully be here. Rather than beating yourself up for not being present as you want, weave compassion in for yourself. Even when you find your mind wandering, the tone, it's coming back in the present moment is really important. But the most important part is the tone with which you bring the mind back in the present moment. Because if you catch your mind wandering and you're coming back with criticism, oh my God, I am so bad at this. It won't work, because the mind will rebel more. So it's super important to understand the tone with which you escort the mind back in the present moment. Compassion and non-expectations is really important when you practice mindfulness. And a lot of teachers out there can confuse a lot of people. So that's super important. Sorry about this tangent, but that's something.
No, it's great. So, we now know that mindfulness, but not just mindfulness, specifically, what did you call the type of present awareness of mindfulness?
No, mindfulness is about present moment awareness, but how you practice it, because, mindfulness, it's about being in the present, but sometimes, even if you want to, the mind will be wandering. And I'm saying what's important here is not so much so it's important to bring the mind back from wandering, but the tone with which you escort the mind back in the present moment is more important. Do it without self-criticism, without judgment. Do it in a gentle tone, because you can't find the mind. You can't fight the mind. If you fight it, it will rebel. Rather, accept it, work with it, and do it in a very gentle tone. And sometimes teachers out there, like, the teachings that I go by are the teachings of John Kabat-Zinn. It's simple, it's straight to the point, but yet so powerful. For the restless,
Yeah, so that's a tool. So that's an amazing tool. That's one of the tools in the toolbox for helping reconnect to the essence, is present awareness, mindfulness, with, you know, being compassionate and not being judgmental to yourself as you go through this process of reconnecting to the essence of who you are with this tool. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes, we can say that. And also, like, connecting back to the senses, because when you disconnect, there's a lot of mind wandering going on. You know, there's a lot of things that deviate your attention. If you want to connect back to the truth of who you are, it's really important to harness the power of senses, you know, utilize the senses to be more anchored in the present moment. Something like body scans. Body scan is a very powerful tool to build awareness and to connect back to yourself. Also, something else, mindful eating. As you're eating, cancel all noise around and solely focus on the food that you're eating. Chew it properly, absorb the flavor, the taste of the food that you're eating, because the energy with which you consume the food that you eat translates, like, you're passing pretty much that same energy onto, like, yourself as the food goes down the digestive tract. So if you're eating in an environment where you're distracted, that's the same energy that you're passing on to yourself. If you're eating with quiet, collected energy where you're paying attention to the food that you're eating, building a connection with it, paying attention to the flavors, the aroma, like cherishing the food, you'll see how much quiet and like how grounding that practice can be.
Wow. So, okay. So here's some other tools for those people that are listening: mindful eating, and really connecting back to your senses of seeing, you know, the colors and hearing the sounds and feeling, you know, the physical sensations, right? So I feel like it's, you know, it's a really challenging thing to practice, especially now, because, you know, in the 21st century, everything is fast. Everyone's trying to get ahead, and everyone's looking, I think, to connect with their true essence, but in the wrong places, with more money, with bigger houses, bigger cars, with, you know, more power and prestige. And I feel, I mean, my observation is people are using these as vehicles to try to connect back to the essence. And in doing so, they are disconnecting even more. Would you agree with that? Or?
Absolutely. Like materialistic possessions. And the thing is, the more you have, the more you can realize, like, what can this money do for me? Or like, am I going to achieve am I going to create authentic relationships from this money? You know, the more you surround yourself with materialistic possessions, the emptier you will feel inside. And like, we see a lot of examples around us. They cannot fill that void. And nobody else can fill that void. Even when there's social disconnection, the first relationship to build is the connection with the self. And another tool that I was going to forget to talk about is observation. Just observing, non-judgmental observation. Observing your thoughts, observing your emotions, observing the internal chatter. When the mind chatters, observe what it tells you. Don't judge, don't react, just observe. That's a tool that allows to understand the truth of who we are, the processes that go within, and especially when there's emotional arousal, when emotions take over, to observe the process.
Okay, so I just want to let's just circle back and recap on because we just talked about a lot, and I want to make sure that everyone's getting this. So we're talking about how to reconnect to the essence of who we are, and we first talked about mindfulness as an umbrella or a tool, if you will, to do that. And within that, you gave us some subcategories or sub ways or tools to use to really do that. So we talked about mindful eating, slowing down, enjoying the food. We talked about connecting to the senses. We talked about what
Observe.
was observing as another. This is another way of practicing present awareness and mindfulness to then be able to start to feel some of the stuff that we buried up, right? And allow that essence, allow the process to begin of reconnecting with who we truly are and that true power within us. Is that about what did we cover it all, or did I miss anything?
Yes, you covered it all. Yeah.
Fantastic. So yeah, so I feel like, this is such a timely topic right now because so many people are feeling even more isolated than
Mm-hmm,
before.
mm-hmm.
And so, where can someone, what with what's going on currently, and I think, maybe you could speak a little bit to in broader terms too, after this is we open up the world again. How can people beyond mindfulness, and I mean, that could be enough, but are there suggestions or things that you would also have helped you or your clients reconnect to that essence? I mean, I feel like what you gave us was absolutely an amazing way. But is there anything else that you feel like the people that are listening to this should also know about how to really begin to connect to that, to start to feel a sense of, maybe what's the opposite of loneliness, would you say? Connection?
Connection,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So are there other ways of connecting to oneself outside of mindfulness that are powerful, that you've seen been effective?
Absolutely. Because, Devin, as human beings, we are like wired for connection. We feed on connection. We get inspiration from connection with other human beings, connection from the universe and its boundaries, connection with um, other living beings. Go hug a tree, surround
I get
yourself
you.
yeah, go in nature, hug a
Yeah.
tree, forest baths, go visit, like, go to the garden, like, surround yourself with other living beings, animals, go to a farm, you know. Also surrounding oneself with other people, other human beings around, like a shared interest, a common interest. Because the problem with loneliness is that after so many failed attempts, we have a tendency to be more and more introverted. Maybe
Mm.
if you keep not like meeting your expectations that you have on, like, building the type of relationships that you want, you tend to kind of like be more secluded because of the negative self-talk that is likely to arise every time you fail, or let's say you have a tendency, yeah, to be more kept to yourself. And, like, I feel a good way of coming out of confinement is finding a way to build connections around a shared interest, a passion, a hobby.
Mm.
And right now that, like, we're practicing social distancing, I feel like connecting with people, like, at least once a day, finding a person that you can connect to and just express and show love, show care. Those are actions that go a long way and come back. They come
Yeah.
back to fold. You show love, you express love, you get it back.
So give that which you want,
Give that
essentially. So,
what you want, and exactly taking control by giving yourself the attention that you're expecting from others. Let's say you'd love for people to show love, show you some attention. Get up, go to the flower store and pick up a bunch of flowers, but offer it to yourself to be in
mm,
control of your life, and to let your mind know that I am here, I exist, and I'm supposed to have a relationship with myself. Those kind of actions go a really long way.
wow. So would that be another form of self-love, self-care, empowered self-care? Is that what you're talking about, Kumba?
Yes, that's the way of building self-awareness,
Beautiful.
self-connection. Yes.
So before we kind of move into this second stage of loneliness and some air and how to begin to start to cultivate this journey of, connection, I wanted to ask you, how did you get into this? I mean, were you, on a path of you were feeling disconnected and lonely, and it led you to start to dive into some of this information? And can you tell us a little bit about, your story and how, you got to, this place of understanding connection and disconnection? And can you share a little bit? Would you mind?
Absolutely.
Okay.
As you know, we attended the same IIN, Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And back then when I enrolled in IIN, I was still in corporate America working as a finance analyst. I have an MBA and a finance degree. And what got me into wellness was that at some point I just included healthy eating and workout in my life. And I experienced such a powerful shift that I wanted to give back what I was feeling. That's how I ended up enrolling in IIN. And the more I studied, the more I wanted to give back. And my life was changing more and more. And then when I did the MBSR, the mindfulness-based stress reduction program with John Kabat-Zinn, he has a program with the UMass Medical School. I had a huge breakthrough. Like I said again, it's a program that's very simple yet very powerful. I had a huge breakthrough. I found myself writing and thinking about authenticity, freedom, self-awareness without even knowing what that was about. That's how I started this line of work, because after IIN, I was more into gut health, detox, and all of that, a little bit of mindfulness, but then it shifted. But then, like you said, my personal experience, especially after grad school, and then I entered the professional world, I would find myself lonelier and lonelier. So all of these stages of loneliness, I can write about.
Yeah.
So,
It's interesting, talking to people, how often it comes from your own struggle, and you're looking for your own pain to try to solve, to try to heal. And then once you find a path that works for you, it's like, wow, I need to share this. I need to give this gift, because there's so many other people that are struggling with, what you were struggling with. You're on the other side of a health condition, or some sort of trauma or pain, or whatever that might be. And so it's always interesting. It's so common to hear stories like that, but that's awesome. So you essentially, after IIN, you did the John Kabat-Zinn mindfulness-based stress reduction training, and that's where you had a big breakthrough with what you were struggling with, which was loneliness.
yes.
Wow, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we move to the next sort of level or category of loneliness, and chat a little bit about, what that means and how we can start to cultivate more connection with that form of loneliness.
The second level of loneliness was because I first mentioned self-disconnection, unwanted loneliness, and that's very painful. That's the reason why I pretty much dubbed loneliness a life taker. Because earlier, when you mentioned people that surround themselves with materialistic possessions to numb the pain, but it doesn't benefit them in any kind of way, I can definitely relate to that. It doesn't matter what you have, it doesn't matter who you are, we all need connection. And it's some type of need that no materialistic possession can fulfill. And loneliness is a silent oppressor because it takes a lot from you. First, because the boredom is something, the mind is a very powerful tool. And when it finds itself to be bored, the mind starts wandering. Mental chatter starts, because it's so powerful, it will start wondering to keep busy, and that's another way where disconnection starts. You take it up to the head, you daydream, you try to recreate sensations of pleasure, you know, sensations that you're lacking in your current life. So you take it up to the brain to recreate those emotions that you crave for. And that's the second type of disconnection that create a lot of mental activities that starts the stress process.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I work with a lot of high performing entrepreneurs. I help a lot of people that have sleep challenges, and I definitely see some of these patterns in the people that I support. And one of the things that a lot of my clients that suffer from insomnia experience is they are usually very intellectual and very smart people, and I always tell them they're stuck in their head. And it's like, in order to really get out of your head and back into your body to start to feel again, so that you're not constantly thinking, which is a form of mental stress, right? And that's really one of the biggest obstacles, I think, with people that are trying to solve with insomnia, is they get stuck in their head, and they can't get out of their head, and these thoughts are coming in and racing mind and keeps them up. And so I know that's not just, I say insomnia is a symptom that something in your mind or body is imbalanced. Right. And so it's, so what are some of the ways that you found to be helpful for people that, kind of have this form of loneliness, that are looking to, is it really the same ways that we talked about as far as connecting your essence? Or if somebody's experiencing more of this type of loneliness, is there another tool or strategy or kind of way to help them get reconnected to themselves and
Well,
others?
all type of loneliness pretty much have the same cycle, but it's pretty much the same process. But the problem with this type of loneliness is like it's unwanted loneliness. So there's negative self-talk, there's self-blame, there's disconnection, there's a lot of stress, because when you think so much, the stress response goes on. There's a lot of stress hormones like adrenaline, cortisol. And as you know, the adrenaline at night will be like, hey, you got to stay awake. There's a threat attack, you can't go to sleep. And that excessive mental chatter will drive you to the point where even like you start experimenting decreased intellectual capacity, a lower ability to focus. There's so many things that are going on. And even like if you're less present in your relationships, in your day-to-day life. So it's a roller coaster effect, one thing after another. And it turns into restlessness and mental exhaustion. And you're totally like completely gone, like completely gone.
Yeah, the zombie land, I call it. You kind of feel like a zombie. You're there, but you're not there.
Absolutely. So it's kind of like, it's outsiders, it's intrusive energies, and it's your thoughts that take over and navigate your life. You're just driven by impulses. You're just driven by stimuli. You're just reactive pretty much to whatever's going on, but you're not controlling your life. When I work with clients that are like restless like that, the first stage is just about being, getting out of the doing and just being. First off, play.
Yeah, play. That sounds good.
Yeah, have fun and play. What are the things that you can do? Take some time off, do things that are like, we build like a schedule around the activities that they are interested in, but just play, engage with your senses. There's nothing to do, just be, relax, and just play. Like reduce, as much as possible, reduce the sense of urgency. I have to do this, I have to get this. So just relax and just be. Wow. Once that's on, we start like awakening with an awakening process through like the power of observation. You're just observing, nothing else but observing and noticing, so it's a process. Observing, connecting to the senses. Also, it's a way of awakening and getting back in the body. Like I mentioned earlier, body scans are very powerful tools to awaken the senses and get back in the body. So it's a process. It's a process. And then when you observe, the powerful thing about observing also, it shakes things up. It shakes things up on its own, and you notice what deserves attention. And then the next process is to feel whatever's coming up, just feel, just notice, learning how to surrender, and then, there's this neurotransmitter that is called dopamine, and another one that's oxytocin. Dopamine is good for, like, we need dopamine. We need to sleep properly to have dopamine. Dopamine is the hormone that will help you be in the present, be able to focus, be able to think, be able to use your mental capacities. Oxytocin is the love hormone when you are isolated, when you don't have thriving relationships, you have low levels of oxytocin. And because of all of that, those deficiencies, you can find yourself not to be at your best level of performance. So we engage in activities that will help you boost those kind of hormones, like like playing with the senses. Touch is super important. Getting massages, that's something that you can even do on your own. Like I said, taking back control of your life is stop expecting and taking control by getting yourself what you need to get done. Because the thing with loneliness is that it's such an oppression that you delegate responsibility, navigation of your life to others, and you tend to wait for permission, waiting for signals, waiting for opportunities, external circumstances to give you the validation to take initiative. So we're shifting that. We're working on that, like massages, giving yourself massages, touching your body just to awaken the senses and like produce those hormones. Wow. Also, the power of imagery, because when you're lonely, there's emotional frustrations, there are emotional needs that are not met, how you can recreate, how you can feed your senses with those emotions by harnessing the power of imagery. Those are all tools that I use in my work with clients to the clients that suffer from that type of loneliness.
Amazing. Wow. That's a lot. So I just want to, again, I'm just going to break it down just to keep it super tangible and clear for people. So what I hear you saying, for people that are suffering from this type of loneliness, it's really about helping them, number one, shift into being, then into observing, and then into feeling. And then some of the tools that you use to help people do that is, touching themselves, self-massage, getting imagery, right? Was there, I think there was one or two other ones I may have missed, but really it's about, it's a step-by-step, there's a step-by-step process really to get from this type of loneliness and feeling disconnected to being connected. And it starts with being, observing, and then feeling. Is that right?
Yeah, like imagery, what I meant earlier is just satisfying emotional needs because through imagery, or something like when you stay a long time without being touched, you have low levels of oxytocin, which impacts your levels of productivity, know. So harnessing the power of touch, if you can go get a massage, that's good, or you can do it on your own. Just by giving yourself a massage, satisfying emotional needs through the power of imagery, those are all tools that can be used to.
So let's talk about that last one for a second. Using imagery. So how may somebody use their imagination, which is a higher faculty, to help themselves begin to heal? In this instance, is it imagining, can you give me an example of like how somebody might do that? You don't have to go into a full meditation or anything like that, but just like what would that look like? I'm just very curious.
Recall a moment where you felt exactly the same way that because the frustrated mind, when there are emotional needs that are not met, you can find yourself to be very irritable, very moody, when you know such such behaviors, such patterns, those are signals of imbalances. So when you observe, we can see that you're frustrated because of imbalances in emotional needs. Okay, what do I need? Well, I want to feel loved right now. Evoke a moment where you felt loved, a moment where exactly you felt the way you want to feel right
Mm.
now. So connect to that moment and don't get into the story or the details, but just the
Wow.
emotion, fitness of the emotion at that very moment, and just connect to it like as if you were living it right now. The sensations that the sensations of those emotions, those sensations, just connect to them, feel them as if it was going on right now, and let them sink in your senses and your body.
Amazing.
It's a very powerful tool to
I could
recreate.
see that, and I could see you could probably either use, if you have strong memories of the past of when you had those, or even create, use your imagination to create something in your mind. So you could go past or future. I could imagine with this technique.
Absolutely. And the more you practice, the better it gets, you know?
Wow, that's awesome! What an amazing tool. I love that. I think, yeah, the mind is an incredibly powerful tool that can either, allow us to really fully embrace this life, or it can just destroy us and keep
Absolutely.
us suffering and keep us in these patterns of self-destructive behavior and disconnection. And so, wow, so that's a lot there. And I definitely want to make sure we have enough time to talk about the third type.
Yeah.
So, which is, this is, I mean, this is really timely. And I think there's so much here to
Mhm.
unpack. And obviously we're just really kind of giving a high level view. If, for those of you listening to this, if you feel like you are in a state of loneliness and disconnection, obviously at the end we'll share how to get in contact with you and learn a little bit more about your work. But why don't we talk about that third category or stage, if you will, of loneliness? What was the third? um, Disconnection with others, I believe. Was that?
The third was like being surrounded and still feeling lonely.
Yes. Okay.
It's not different from the first two because you'll see all of them have one point in common, being disconnected from the self. That's where it starts.
Got
But
it.
then it's like being surrounded with people, like unfulfilling
Mm.
relationships where you're not fulfilled. Why? Because maybe those relationships compels you to oppress or forego the truth of who you are. So it creates an internal emptiness that you're feeling a void that gets bigger over time. Or sometimes even people that are in relationship, married or like
Mm.
have partners, but they're not fulfilled, and that's some type of a void over there. You still feel lonely, you know. Um, you're in a surrounding where you cannot be fully the truth of who you are. That's
Mm.
another disconnection. It's pretty much conditioning. You're being conditioned to be a certain way to fit the mold, and that's still another sort of loneliness.
Wow. Yeah. So I personally have experienced all three of these types, and specifically that one you're talking about. I know for me, it was maybe about when I really started my spiritual healing journey and health journey. It was in college, and I had a lot of friends. I used to throw these big parties in college with lots, hundreds of people. I was like the party guy, believe it or not. And I'd be in a room with hundreds of people and feel completely lonely and disconnected. And I remember it was painful, because it was like, well, at that point I didn't understand, well, what the hell, why am I feeling this way? Like, look at all these people. How could I feel lonely in a room full of people that are trying to connect with me? And it wasn't, as I began to learn and study, and I had an experience that kind of woke me up, if you will, to it can be confusing, because it's that type of loneliness is a tricky one, because you're like, you don't know why. You're like, well, I don't get it. I'm in a relationship. I have physical connection, or I have friends, but yet you still have this sense of disconnection. And I think that third one can be a bit tricky and confusing for people. I know it was for me. And so why don't we talk about, where would somebody that is experiencing that currently, where would they start to begin the journey to healing that and to reconnecting to their essence?
I like to use this tool, powerful questionings, that when I start working with clients sometimes, because Devin, there's one thing that I always say: we are our own healers. Like, guides and other healers are here to give us tools, but at the end of the day, we're our own healers. If you go to yoga, meditation, or whatever, while practicing, once you're done, there's a full feel-good effect. But your behavior when you get off the mat determines how you feel afterwards. If you want to go back to mind wandering or mental chatter, you'll sink back in the gutter. So it depends on you. It's totally up to you. But I'm saying clarity is at the root of healing. So it's good to question things. I have a set of like clarity questioning that I work through with my clients to really unearth what's at the root of these behaviors. Why are you confused, or what the root cause of a certain issue could be. So it's good to really get with yourself and start like asking questions, observing to really find out what it is about, and soul searching too.
Yeah.
Soul searching,
Yeah. It's, so that makes a lot of sense. Self-inquiry, asking questions, having a coach to support, to create a space for you to really, think about your thoughts and soul searching. I mean, that's really what it was for me. It took me to the jungles of Costa Rica and under a waterfall, having an experience to really open me up to the reality of why I was feeling that way. So, there's a lot of tools, right? And so it's depending on where you're being led and who's leading you, that could be it could be a one type of experience. So that's amazing. So, so much good stuff here, just golden gems. Why don't we, is there anything else? I mean, we talked about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I want to kind of start to tie all this together and wrap it up. And we didn't talk, I do want to talk about one more very important thing, because, I'm helping people with insomnia, and, this is going to be on my channel. And, let's talk about the connection before we wrap it up, the connection between loneliness and disconnection and sleep, because this is, I think I see it totally. The patterns that we've just described, I would say almost every one of my clients that I work with have these types of patterns. And, can you speak a little bit about, how this how this type of behavior or experience, how it can affect our sleep, and maybe just shine a little light on that topic for us?
Absolutely, because sleep is super important. We don't realize it, but sleep is super important for
Yeah.
everything that we do. Mental processes, digestion, for pretty much our health. You cannot be productive, you cannot have a good energy to do what is expected of you, what you have to do, or what you're expecting your body to deliver if your sleep is poor. Proper digestion requires proper sleep, and a lot of physiological processes happen when we sleep. So at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep daily. But when we're caught up in a circle of restlessness, when the mind is always running round the clock, at nighttime when we're trying to sleep, it won't, the stress hormones that we create with all of this excessive chatter will not let us go to sleep. Because when we're stressing out, when we're thinking so much, the body is thinking that there's an attack that it needs to defend us from.
Yeah.
So when it's time to go to sleep, the body will be like, hey, Devin, no, you can't go to sleep. There's a threat attack. You have to stay awake. And that's what adrenaline does. And also that stress is why we are so restless. Like, it doesn't matter how much time you spend laying down, but you can't feel rested. So I like to tell my clients to prepare for sleep before going to bed. 2 or 3 hours before sleep, disconnect from electronics, disconnect from work, relax, read books, put yourself in a relaxing state of mind, relaxing environment, drink tea, breathe, take it easy and slow down the thinking so you can prepare for sleep.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. I call that a bed buffer.
Yes.
And then a nighttime ritual. So that's so super powerful and so important. And like I said, I totally see these patterns in the people that I work with. And you know, so it's good to know that, you know, it's good to have a framework and kind of know, hey, there is, it makes perfect sense what you're saying. So is there anything else that before we wrap it up that you want to share with people that are going to be listening to this that you think would be important for people to know if they're listening to this and they're feeling a sense of disconnection and loneliness? Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Well, the thing with loneliness, like I said, it can throw someone in a state where they feel like they are not in control of their situation, so why not give up because they feel powerless? And I'm saying you're not bound to such a grim tale. You always are in control, and it starts with harnessing the power of awareness. Start observing, reach out for support. In our society, there's this misconception and this judgment, stereotyping about loneliness. People don't want to speak about loneliness because they will be judged to be lame, they will be judged to be unwanted. And even it drives you to the point where you start thinking about yourself in a certain way, like you completely give up on your life and fear over. But it's never too late. Reach out for support. Talk to people and do the work because it's all about mindset. It's all about mindset, and don't let fear take over. You can get.
Beautiful. Thank you. So how can what's the best way that people can, you know, that are going to be listening to this, what's the best way that they can reach out to you? I know you mentioned that you have a, you know, like a freebie that or a guide that you can share with people, but what's the best way? If somebody listens to this and said, hey, I need, you know, this makes a lot of sense. How can people reach you?
Yeah, I do have this blueprint that is called "From Loneliness to Turn Loneliness to Freedom." You can access this freebie on my website www.yugabellawellness.com/freebies. Yuga Bella, it spells like YUGA Bella Wellness.com/freebie, and my website is www.yugabellawellness.com.
Okay.
My Instagram, Kumba_Shakur. So feel free to reach out. I'm offering free clarity sessions or powerful questioning sessions in case you'd be interested. I'll be more than willing to help in these times because we can all use some support.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's, you know, reaching out for support is actually a sign of strength, not weakness. And, you know, it takes courage, but we all need it. We all need it, especially now. And with what's going on in the world, I think that we need to be even more open to getting to support from people to help us on our journeys. So I'll definitely put a link below this video interview with your details. If anyone wants to go ahead and grab that freebie or hop on a call with you to learn more about how you can support them. But I want to say thank you so much. I'm really happy that we were finally able to get connected here. I mean, we definitely had some tech challenges and scheduling challenges, but this was a very valuable conversation, very timely conversation, especially with what most people are experiencing right now. And honestly, Kumba, it makes a lot of sense what you're talking about. And I think that, you know, I'm grateful that you're doing this type of work and guiding people to experience a connection, a reconnection with who they really are, their essence. Because at the end of the day, I mean, we're on this planet for a short time, and let's make it the best short time ever. And that starts with getting reconnected to the essence of who we are and stepping into our power. I know that's what you help women do and men. And so I want to thank you for being on the show, and I look forward to having future conversations about loneliness and stress and mindfulness. So thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, Devin. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.